Hello guys. What happens when the universe's greatest detective is called to solve a crime beyond human comprehension? And what if the price of finding the truth is the annihilation of a world? The smell came first. Not the familiar London cocktail of coal smoke, damp tweed, and Watson's pipe tobacco. This was ozone, crystalline dust, and something metallic that tasted of wrongness on the back of his tongue. Sherlock Holmes opened his eyes not to the cluttered comfort of 221B Baker Street, but to a ceiling of shifting, pearlescent light. He was horizontal, strapped to a surface that felt like cool, polished obsidian. A figure stood over him, its form defying terrestrial biology. It was tall, impossibly slender, with skin like spun moonlight and 4 limbs that ended in delicate, 3-pronged manipulators. Its head was an elegant ovoid, featureless save for 2 deep, luminous pools that pulsed with soft blue light. They were not eyes, he deduced, but communication organs. A voice echoed directly inside his mind, not as sound, but as pure, unadulterated comprehension. You are the one they call a finder, a solver of knots. We have a knot that cannot be untied. The pressure in his skull was immense, a violation of the sanctum of his mind palace. Holmes tested his restraints. They were not leather or metal, but bands of solid, unyielding light. The being leaned closer, its mental voice dropping to a whisper of cold, desperate logic. Our king is murdered. You will find his killer. Or your world will be unwritten from existence. There was no negotiation, no appeal. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the casual finality of a god swatting a fly. The fire had been lit long before he arrived. He was merely the fuel chosen to burn. The restraints dissolved. Holmes was guided through corridors that were not built but grown, twisting arteries of living crystal that hummed with latent power. The air was thin, tasting of strange elements his periodic table had never conceived. The beings, the Xylos, moved with a liquid grace, their featureless faces offering no tells, no micro-expressions for him to catalog. Their thoughts, however, brushed against his mind like phantom whispers, a constant, low-level telepathic hum of a collective consciousness. His guide, the one who had taken him, introduced itself as Calyx, steward of the Outer Veil. A title, Holmes surmised, for a kidnapper with a budget. Calyx explained the situation with chilling simplicity. King Xylocron IX, ruler of the Crystalline Imperium for 3 cycles, was found shattered in his throne room. The concept of murder was archaic to them, a forgotten barbarism from their primordial past. Their society was built on absolute transparency, a shared mental field where deceit was supposedly impossible. And yet, the king was dead. The primary suspect was the king's own progeny, Prince Xylar. The motive, Calyx's thoughts projected, was brutal ambition. The prince considered his father's reign stagnant, his philosophies of measured expansion, a weakness. Xylar was a proponent of the cleansing flame, an ideology that advocated for aggressive galactic dominance. He believed the Imperium's destiny was to impose its perfect logic upon the chaotic, lesser species of the cosmos, including humanity. Calyx led Holmes to the throne room. The scene was an exercise in alien horror. The king was not a body of flesh and blood, but a magnificent, sentient crystal construct, 10 feet tall. Now, he was 1,000 glittering shards scattered across a floor of pure energy. No weapon was found, no signs of entry. The royal guard, crystalline sentinels linked to the king's life force, had simply deactivated. It was a perfect, impossible crime. His life matrix was destabilized from within, Calyx projected. A resonant frequency weapon of immense sophistication. Only someone with access to the royal genetic codes and the energy conduits of the Spire could have done this. That meant the killer was one of 3 people. Prince Xylar, the heir, Queen Cytherea, the heir, Queen Cytherea, the king's consort. Or High Lector Vorlag, keeper of the central consciousness matrix, the soul of the Spire. Holmes demanded to see them. He was a consulting detective, not an inquisitor, but here, the roles blurred. His mind was his only tool, and he would wield it like a scalpel. The meeting with Prince Xylar took place in a chamber overlooking the planet's swirling amethyst storms. Xylar was a younger, sharper version of the king's fragmented form, his crystalline structure radiating a palpable heat of impatience and power. The Earth creature, Xylar's thoughts stabbed at Holmes, laced with contempt. Calyx's desperate gambit. Tell me, primitive, how can you comprehend a crime you lack the vocabulary to describe? Holmes met the prince's mental gaze, his own mind a fortress of disciplined thought. The motive is a language that transcends species, Your Highness, Holmes replied, his spoken words feeling clumsy and loud in the silent chamber. You believe your father's caution was a chain? You believe in manifest destiny? His death conveniently frees your hands. Xylar's mental projection was a sneer. My father was a fossil, clinging to an age of peace that no longer exists. He saw the galaxy as a garden to be tended. I see it as a wilderness to be tamed. His passing is not a tragedy, it is a catalyst. It was a confession in all but name, delivered with the chilling conviction of a zealot. There was no grief, only purpose. Next was the queen. Cytherea was a being of intricate, latticed crystal, her light soft and sorrowful. But Holmes detected something beneath the performance of grief. A core of unyielding, cold control. Her thoughts were shielded, a rare and difficult skill among the Xylos. He was my light, my other half, she projected, the thought feeling rehearsed, hollow. Xyler's ambition was a poison in this court. He is the storm that has finally broken. Holmes observed the patterns of light shifting within her form. They were not random flickers of emotion. They were controlled, deliberate, a living cipher. Your union with the king was not just one of partnership, but of biointegration, was it not? Holmes asked. Your life forces were entwined. His death should have critically wounded you. Yet you seem intact. A flicker, a crack in the shield. Our bond was complex, she projected, a wave of calculated sadness washing over him. The pain is a private matter, a lie. He knew it with absolute certainty. The pain wasn't private, it was absent. The final suspect was High Lector Vorlag. He resided at the apex of the spire, a nexus of pure information. Vorlag was ancient, his crystalline body clouded and dense with the weight of millennia. He was less a person and more a living library of the Xylos race. The king had begun to question the divinity of the spire. Vorlag's thoughts droned, heavy with ideological sorrow. He sought to sever our people from the central matrix, to grant them true chaotic individuality. It was heresy, an abomination. A heresy you felt compelled to stop? Holmes pressed. Vorlag's immense consciousness pulsed. The spire protects its children. The king had become a disease. The spire excised him. It was not murder, it was purification. 3 suspects, 3 confessions. A son's ambition, a queen's betrayal, a priest's fanaticism. Each had the motive, means, and opportunity. It was a classic three-pipe problem, transplanted to a world where the pipe smoked with alien energies. Holmes spent cycles, their equivalent of days, in the Xylos archives. He devoured their history, their science, their philosophy. He learned that the resonant frequency weapon could be calibrated to a unique genetic signature, but it left a residual psychic echo, a scream in the shared mental field. The problem was, the echo was scrambled, deliberately corrupted to implicate all 3 suspects. The killer was not just a murderer, but a masterful manipulator of information. He found an inconsistency in the energy logs of the spire. On the cycle of the murder, there was a massive, unauthorized energy drain from the outer conduits, the ones maintained not by the royal technicians, but by the steward of the outer veil, Calyx, the quiet, helpful official who had brought him here. Holmes replayed every interaction, every projected thought. Calyx had been the one to name the 3 suspects. Calyx had provided the evidence against them. Calyx had framed the entire narrative. It was too neat, too perfect. He had been so focused on the royalty, on the grand, operatic motives, that he had overlooked the stage manager. He confronted Calyx in the transportation chamber, the same one where he had arrived. You found the killer, Calyx projected, his mental tone one of satisfaction. Prince Xyler will be convicted, he will be shattered, and the queen will rule as regent. The Imperium will be preserved from his reckless expansionism. You are wrong, Holmes said, his voice cold. Xyler is a zealot, the queen is a liar, Vorlag is a fanatic, but none of them are the killer. The psychic echo was not merely scrambled, it was forged. A complex fabrication designed to point in 3 directions at once. An act of profound technical and psychological genius. An act, I suspect, of a steward who oversees the very systems used to create it. Calyx's form remained placid, but his mental field tightened, becoming a shield of ice. You are a primitive. Your logic is flawed. Is it? Holmes countered, stepping closer. The energy drain. It wasn't for the weapon. It was for something else, something far more power-intensive. Like breaching the security of a forbidden system. Like breaching the security of a forbidden system. Tell me, Calyx, what is the outer veil you are steward of? The chamber grew cold. The pearlescent walls dimmed. You were a tool. Your purpose is fulfilled. My purpose is to find the truth. Holmes snapped, his mind racing, connecting the final, terrible dots. And the truth is not that the king was killed to stop a war, but that he was killed to start one. Xyler's cleansing flame was never his own ideology. You planted it. You nurtured his ambition, stoked his resentment. You needed a charismatic, aggressive leader to take the throne. Someone who would launch the Imperium into the galactic conflict your faction has been planning for decades. Calyx's mental voice was no longer a calm projection. It was a roar of pure, unveiled power that buckled Holmes at the knees. The king was a sentimental fool. He made a pact with a rival species, the Silicates, sharing technology that should have been ours alone. He advocated for peace when the universe demands strength. Survival is not earned through cooperation. It is seized by conquest. The featureless face finally betrayed an emotion, not hate, but a terrifying, righteous certainty. This was his ideology, his pain. The pain of seeing his people, in his view, grow weak and complacent. So you engineered a coup, Holmes stated, forcing himself to stand upright against the psychic pressure. You couldn't simply kill the king, that would make you a traitor. But if his own son was the killer, a son whose rhetoric you carefully crafted, his ascension would be seen as a tragic but necessary evolution. You murdered your king, framed his family, and abducted a lesser being from a forgotten planet to be the final, unimpeachable witness, the perfect pawn to legitimize the entire affair. Calyx's form began to glow, the light within him shifting from soft blue to a malevolent, burning crimson. You are more perceptive than I calculated. A flaw in my design. It was the detail of my abduction, Holmes said, his voice barely a whisper. Why go to such lengths? Because a local investigator could be biased or silenced. But an alien, a creature of pure, detached logic, would be seen as infallible. My reputation was your final weapon. And so it ends, Calyx projected. Bands of red light erupted from the walls, identical to the ones that had first restrained him. But these did not seek to hold. They sought to disintegrate. Holmes had no weapon, no escape. He had only his mind. You will fail, Holmes said, his voice steady despite the imminent threat. You underestimated me, and you underestimated your own people. He closed his eyes, not in surrender, but in concentration. He focused his entire consciousness, his disciplined mind palace, on a single thought, a single truth, and he broadcast it. He used the very telepathic intrusion Calyx had forced upon him as a conduit, pushing the entire investigation, the evidence, the energy logs, Calyx's confession, out into the Xylos's shared mental field. It was not a whisper. It was a scream of pure, unassailable logic that ripped through their collective consciousness. A wave of universal, horrified understanding swept the planet, the truth. In the chamber, Calyx staggered, his light flickering violently. The psychic backlash of an entire race discovering his betrayal was a tsunami he could not withstand. No, he shrieked, a sound both mental and, for the first time, physical. His crystalline form cracked, spiderwebbing with fractures. The red light bands dissolved. Calyx, the true killer, the master manipulator, shattered into a million pieces of dull, lifeless glass. The room fell silent. Holmes stood alone, breathing heavily, amidst the remains of his kidnapper. He had won. He had solved the crime. A moment later, the familiar, sickening feeling of dislocation washed over him. He opened his eyes. He was back in his chair. The fire roared in the hearth. Rain lashed against the windows of 221B Baker Street. Watson was across from him, mid-sentence, and I told him it was preposterous, Holmes. Are you quite all right? You went completely pale for a moment. Holmes stared into the flames. He was home. He was safe. But he was not the same. He had not saved the Xylos. He had given them a truth their fragile, transparent society was never meant to handle. The Queen, the Prince, the High Lector, their legitimacy was shattered. The hero who saved them from the King was a traitor. Their entire power structure had been built on a lie, and he had demolished it. He hadn't brought justice. He had brought chaos, a power vacuum that would incite a civil war more destructive than any galactic conquest Sylar could have imagined. He had been a tool after all. His logic had not been a scalpel. It had been a bomb. And the haunting ideology of Calyx, that survival is seized by conquest, felt chillingly, terribly true. The pursuit of absolute truth can be its own form of destruction. It reminds us that some knots, when untied, do not reveal a simple string, but unravel the very fabric of reality. If this story twisted your mind and left you questioning everything, hit like, share it with fellow mystery lovers, and subscribe. For more mind-bending stories where logic collides with the impossible, check out my channel. There's a lot more waiting to blow your mind.